So for most things, fitness-related shortcuts generally aren't worth taking. So when getting the bar off your chest, you should shove the bar back first to reduce that moment arm between the bar and the shoulder as quickly as possible. This way, once you hit the sticking point a few inches off your chest, your front delts don't need to work nearly as hard to overcome that shoulder flexion.
So we live in an awesome era where you find genuine masters of their crafts on YouTube now. And it's truly a wonderful thing. So this video is going to be for martial artists, but what's going to be interesting is I'm not particularly looking at another martial artist to give you guys that insight that I would like to draw forth. There's a guy who teaches strength and conditioning on YouTube, Jeff Nippard. I'm going to put the link to a particular video in the description below, because what he is doing in this is teaching you guys how to punch with power. Even though he's not meaning to, we could call it an accidental lesson on punching. But it's critical, and it's what a lot of martial artists don't understand or neglect in their own training. So let's get to it. Okay, so one of the things that Jeff talks about is the force vector of a bench press, right? And first of all, if you are not doing strength and conditioning, if you're not doing weight training, resistance training, not just body weight training, as a martial artist, you are leaving a lot of potential and gains on the table. Why? Because there are certain parts of the body that only adapt to load. And unless you are highly skilled in calisthenics and are actually able to understand deleveraging positions so that you can apply more load, which can cause certain kinds of adaptations, it's very difficult to produce the same kinds of results. Because martial artists do not just need to have strong muscles or have endurance. You need to have strong bones, strong tendons, strong ligaments, all of which adapt to heavier resistances and stressors. Right? So on the one hand, you need to be conditioning, right? You need to be hitting solid things, and a bag is not going to do it. You got to be hitting harder surfaces to be able to condition the bones, but just lifting heavy weights, right? Doing your 1, 3, 5 rep maxes are enough to increase bone density, increase tendon and ligament strength. And you can't replicate these unless you are a highly skilled calisthenics athlete and understand how to deleverage positions. It's a lot easier to jump on a bench press or hit the squat and load that shit up, right? So that being said, the value from Jeff is this, is that he's talking about the line that resistance should work in a push vector. And he does it phenomenally well. So I'm going to play a short clip here.
Okay, so the first step is to fix your bar path, or the path the bar takes when viewed from the side. Now on the other two power lifts, the squat and the deadlift, it's good lifting advice to keep the bar path as vertical as possible. Ideally, the bar should move up and down in a perfectly straight line centered over the middle of the foot. And I think this has led many lifters to assume that you should also use a vertical bar path on the bench press, which isn't true. Now, to maximize strength on the bench press, you should be pressing the bar back toward your face and then up, not just straight up. And in order to understand this, we need to cover some basic biomechanics first. Now with the bench press, the pecs and front delts are contracting to perform horizontal shoulder adduction, basically where you bring your arm across your body like in a fly. But that's not the only movement pattern here. Unless you're doing a guillotine press, where you lower the bar straight down to your neck, there will also be some degree of shoulder flexion occurring, where you raise your arm up like in a front raise.
So why does this matter? This points out a couple of things, right? This looks at the angle of force when applying force from the shoulder and beyond, right? A lot of martial artists practice striking from the hip, right? When we're training, and then in fighting, they bring the hands up, which makes, according to him, according to me, a lot more sense. Learning to strike from the hip does very little in terms of understanding not just how to generate speed and power, but it teaches you how to put yourself in a leveraged position so that you're aligning your bones and that you are putting your body weight behind the technique, right? So if you are striking, I'll show another example here, people striking to the center line, which you also see in a lot of martial arts.
And this time, make sure that the forefist ends up on the solar plexus line, sometimes called the center line. And punch at shoulder.
Right, so we've got two issues here. And we live in an era where we know so much about biomechanics and how to move that there is no justification for taking techniques and tools as gospel truth from any teacher whatsoever. We need to be looking at higher principles that govern how we move and how we perform because we know them now. This doesn't need to be my master's master taught me something because he learned it from somebody else on a mountaintop. We understand how the body should move in order to generate power and force. And what's great about this example that Jeff is looking at is he's looking at the push vector, and he's looking at how we can generate the greatest amount of power, the greatest amount of force with the push.
Now let's contrast this with lowering the bar down and forward, but then pressing the bar straight up. When you press the bar straight up off your chest, you keep that moment arm in place, meaning your front delt has to work extra hard to move the weight up. And you'll be much weaker if you bench press this way. Data from Dr. Thomas McLaughlin found that not only do the biomechanics make sense, it also plays out in the real world. He found that while most benchers did correctly bring the bar down and slightly forward in a smooth arc on the descent, only elite level benchers drove the bar back and then up, whereas novice lifters tended to press the bar straight up first and then slightly back.
Right, and he's not saying we push from the shoulders down toward the hips. He's not saying that we actually need to push from shoulder line into center line. If anybody's ever done a push-up, right, you guys know, that when you're doing triangle push-ups toward the center, predominantly hits the triceps, anterior deltoids, very little chest, and it's the weakest of push-up positions. This is probably closer to the strongest of push-up positions for most people, slightly wider than the shoulder, which balances pecs, triceps, anterior deltoids. We work out a little bit farther, the triceps do less work, the chest starts to take over. So if you're looking to body build, knowing that can help you target certain parts of the body, but if you are looking to strike, then what he is telling us is that first, that hand needs to raise to a point where it is moving up and closer to the shoulder line before we strike. Does that look familiar? Most boxing stances, most MMA stances are going to look like that anyway, right? Why? It's the strongest possible punch. Now what he's also showing us, and this is really interesting, right, is that that line of force cannot and should not change too much as we exert. So if you watch people like, we might have it in ITF Taekwondo as one example, or we might have it in actual boxing. Most of these guys are punching off the shoulder line. They're not punching onto the center line. This can be deceptive in boxing, but it's the same thing. So when we strike in ITF Taekwondo, for example, the strike comes off the shoulder line, not onto the center line. People are like, yeah, but I mean, you got to hit to the other person's center, the nose, the solar plexus, the philtrum, whatever you might be striking, right, into one of these targets. Training and actual application are not the same thing. And while we do need practices that convert what we do into those things, technical development, when you are punching in the air, is not real application. That's tool development. And so you need to decide what your priority is in that experience. Are you trying to develop the best biomechanics, the best physical structure, the best speed, the best coordination of that technique? Or are you trying to actually be in a fight right then and there? These are not the same thing. So the way that's dealt with in Taekwondo is that the line gets offset, right? So if here would be off my shoulder line, well, I step into position. Here's my new center line, but there's the strike. Right? This happens in all ITF patterns. Whereas you find in WTF Taekwondo, a lot of some of the Chinese martial arts, not all of them, most Chinese martial arts, they'll strike to the center line. This fundamentally puts you in a weaker structure for striking. Okay, and boxers, they get away with this. How? By changing the line of the shoulders. They're actually facing that way while this strike comes in to the opponent's center line, but not their own. Right? It actually follows the same trajectory. So that's really important to keep in mind. Now, there are a couple systems that effectively use the center line, and it is not, in my opinion, not the Korean style, Japanese style, and very few mainland Chinese. But you've got Wing Chun as one example that uses the center line highly effectively. What they are doing, though, that's different, is that this is not a power punching system. This is super important, right? The sophistication that Wing Chun has in terms of their hand striking strategy. It's like playing 3D chess, whereas most other martial arts, you got your Korean and Japanese styles, are like, they're 2D checkers. I mean, they're very rudimentary, they're power-based, they don't develop the kind of sensitivity and interrelational skills that Wing Chun develops. And as such, Wing Chun compromises and it relinquishes some of the capacity for power in the strike for strategic advancement and control. So they know that they're making up that gap. You're never going to find a Wing Chun puncher strike like a Japanese or karate puncher. It's just not going to happen. They're not going to have the bone strength and development that takes years to develop. They're not going to have the same body mechanics. It's a fundamentally different type of striking. Doesn't mean they can't be awesome and hit like hell, which many of them can. It just means that according to the structure, your biomechanics, it's an inferior striking position. Hoo-wee. So guys, I want to keep this video short, but look, there are a lot of potential topics around just even power punching that we could look at. There are other key factors, for example, like in what way are you trying to generate power from the rest of the body, right? Are you fundamentally using centripetal force, working through the rotational force of the hips, coming through the legs? Are you working on dropping your weight into the technique so that now there's body weight moving forward and dropping into the technique? Are you lifting and rising into all of these, the latter being Chinese, the former being Japanese or Korean? You've got some of these really old patterns of movement, and each one has a unique way of applying force, right? The one that I just talked to you about should be the same for all strikers everywhere, unless you are a Wing Chun specialist and actually know that you are compromising on your power striking. But even knowing, right, Wing Chun strikes with a vertical fist. Most of these other arts actually roll the hand over. Why? Understanding that as soon as you start to lift the arm, right, this is flexion of the shoulder, this is extension of the shoulder. As soon as you start to drop that arm and that shoulder, this is actually what tightens up the shoulder girdle and allows tension throughout the entire arm. So why don't we start from this position? It pre-tenses the shoulder. That's why all these striking systems have a relaxed hands, and it's not until the very end that rolls over, right? Relax, relax, relaxed, moment of impact, hand rolls over, grinds down. It's not just, some people will tell you it's about friction and moving, friction on skin and actually grinding. It has nothing to do with it. All it has to do is tightening your structure on impact so that you've got now your whole body weight, and at the shoulder, the elbow, the wrist is not exposed in that technique. These are all weak links. As soon as that happens, boom, everything tightens up. Now I've got my whole body behind that punch. Yeah, I could rant on this stuff forever. Love it. A lot of the stuff that I'm focused on is what makes us more effective in everything that we do, right? Not just one domain. And the problem with a lot of these things is we're looking down a level. You're a karateist, you're a taekwondoist, whatever it is. But these are specialist systems, and they're ignoring a level higher, right? The system for all humans that makes us all move in similar fashions, right? So when you start to become a specialist and you don't do what's in common for all humans at all times, right, you're missing a lot of what makes you a powerful, focused, coordinated individual, and you're sacrificing all that. So it's important that you do go up a layer, look at foundational patterns of movement, breathing, focus, concentration, all these things, because they transfer to all things. After that, you can start to hone in and say, well, does my system adhere to these fundamental principles of movement? Am I really training the best possible approach for this? But yeah, let me know in the comments if you have any questions or found this topic interesting, if would like other things similar or not. And yeah, like, subscribe, and until the next time, be weightless.